Alien is better than Jaws. What's up, everybody? So let's talk about Alien, directed by Ridley Scott, which came out in 1979, starring Sigourney Weaver. It has a lot of other great actors as well, including Ian Holm, Tom Skerritt, John Hurt. Now, with the opening, I was very plain and clear. I think Alien is a superior movie to Jaws. Now, here are my reasons for it. One, let's just talk about the alien, the creature itself. Okay? Now, if before I go into that, if you've been living under a rock, if you've never seen Alien, the premise of the movie is a group of basically outer space construction workers of some kind. Like they're definitely working class. It's not fancy people or astronauts or anything like that. I always forget exactly who they are, but they're just regular people. They're just normal guys, and they're in space working, and they get a distress signal. And they're told to go to this place. They do. An alien finds its way onto their ship and just systematically begins killing all of them. Now, the real star of this movie is not Sigourney Weaver, as much as I love her and she does an absolutely great job. Ripley is one of those characters that she was born to play. No other actor, past, present, or future, could have played Ripley. This was for her, fate. And but the real star of this show is H.R. Geiger, because no matter what you might think of anything else, the image of the alien is immortal. It's iconic. And to think of a time when they're putting this movie together and they have no idea what the alien is supposed to look like, and then all of a sudden H.R. Geiger pops up and then he shows them, some of these concept art that he created for a Dune movie, by the way. If you ever, I highly recommend go and watch. I think it's called Jodorowsky's Dune. Mexican director Alejandro Jodorowsky was originally going to put together the movie Dune before David Lynch did in the early 80s, and then eventually Denis Villeneuve. But if you look at the concept art for the different worlds, you see that the Harkonnen planet was basically the kind of images you see from Alien as far as the creature. And this would not have been the same movie if the creature looked like anything else. I heard a commentary about this where one of the original ideas for the creature was to take a orangutan and shave it and then show it in the dark with shadows and things like that. Thank God they didn't do that. But it's absolutely essential. It's just like imagine Darth Vader looking in a different way or a different color. You know, the creature needed to look like that. And then the most important thing aside from the creature itself is the characters themselves. They feel so real. They feel so grounded. They feel so relatable with how they talk to each other, the banter, and it's just a nice, very slow build that you're kind of getting to know these guys before the inciting incident. And so when the inciting incident basically culminates with the chest burster, it's even more dramatic and it's more grotesque and it's traumatic, actually, to be very honest with you. And those two things needed to merge together. You needed the right creature, the right look, while at the same time you needed to actually care and invest about these characters, so that way when things start happening to them, you feel a certain kind of way. You feel the dread before it happens. You feel the sense of loss and horror when it does. And it's one of those things that is like, it's a nice, easy build up until that point. You know what I mean? Every scene kind of bleeds into each other seamlessly. It's the brilliance of Ridley Scott. And so when everything just flips on its head and the horror of this horror movie begins, you know, it's gripping. It hooks you in. You can't look away. And it's funny because I think for me, the first time I watched it, I was way too young to watch it. I was maybe 8 or 9 years old. And I watched it really bits of it. I never saw it from beginning to end. When it came on TV, I just saw certain parts of it. Uh, Really, the first Alien movie I watched was the sequel, Aliens, directed by James Cameron, which I'm going to make a video about later. Uh, and then I wanted to go back and really see it from beginning to end. And while it might not have been as exciting because it leaned more on the horror and less on the action, and I'm not a huge horror guy, but it's a movie that just stays with you. You know, you're impressed by the performances, you're impressed by the world that Ridley Scott created, you're impressed by the creature as well as terrified. And you know, it all just kind of came together. You know, even with the movie poster, where it's like, no one can hear you scream in space. You know, which is just a terrifying idea. And then when if you get a little deeper into the lore of how the movie was created, even when it was said it's Jaws in space, which is why I brought up Jaws to begin with. You know, it took basically the premise of Jaws and rearranged the furniture, but I think the way that they rearrange the furniture makes it for a superior movie. Anyways, those are my thoughts on it. What about you guys? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Smash that like button, give me a follow, and I'll see you guys next time.